In the English Premier League, Manchester City have responded to the news that they're facing over 100 charges from the Premier League over alleged financial breaches. City says they are surprised by the news and say they have provided extensive engagement with the league over the investigation. Their statement reiterates they welcome the review by an independent commission. The club has been the subject of a 4-year investigation which was delayed by legal challenges. But the Premier League has announced that the alleged breaches have been referred to a commission, leaving the club facing a range of potential punishments if found guilty. Joining us now from Newcastle upon Tyre is Assistant Professor in Accounting at Northumbria University. He's also a football finance expert, Mark Midling, to discuss these breaches and what could potentially happen to Manchester City. A very good evening and welcome to Newzroom Afrika. Thanks for your time. Can you just break down the length of this investigation and how are Manchester City able to breach these regulations for close to a decade?
Thank you very much for having me on. And in terms of the first thing I think that we have to realise is these are accusations at the moment. Manchester City haven't yet been found guilty of any wrongdoing. These allegations go back to 2009 right up to pretty much the present day. They involve a number of different things, including the remuneration of a previous manager and the breach of financial fair play regulations such as overstating revenues and understating expenses of the club as well. I believe, as you said, there was over 100 allegations, which is quite considerable.
Where are these breaches actually going beyond the lines of just a sports body and what a sports body expects is ethical and things actually being criminal? I
haven't seen any accusations of criminal wrongdoing. And I think it would be remiss of us at this time to talk in those terms. The accusations are about breaking the Premier League rules. So what you have in the Premier League is a system of governance that's effectively a members' club and is able to set its own rules as such. So it's the rules that are set by the Premier League, which is effectively the clubs in the Premier League that Manchester City are accused of breaching.
The Premier League's financial fair play rules are designed to ensure that clubs spend what they earn. So how is City able to inflate their earnings and not provide actual figures?
I think there's sort of two things here. Firstly, all Premier League clubs are actually allowed to spend more than they earn. Over a 3-year period, Premier League clubs are allowed to lose £105 million, particularly if it's backed up by equity, by money put in by the owner of the football club. So they are actually allowed to lose some money there. How have they been able to do this? I think there's a number of things here. I think most clubs probably play the system to an extent. I think Manchester City have just been doing it to a greater degree in terms of the scale. They are the richest club in the world. They had a turnover last year of £619 million. They topped the Deloitte rich list in terms of clubs. So in terms of that, it's a scale here that could be more alarming. The Manchester City have been quite good at utilising their city group. So they own a number of football clubs across the world. I believe they have one in New York and one in Melbourne in Australia. So, for example, there was Aaron Moy who signed for the club in Melbourne and then was immediately transferred to Manchester City. So the cost of the player was borne by the Melbourne club, but was effectively given on a free transfer to Manchester City or thereabouts. So there's been a little bit of dealing in that way. There's also been some accusations of inflated contracts. I know the airline contract, for example, the sponsorship deal there has been accused of being sort of inflated. So I think it's a combination of factors that the Premier League are accusing them of.
People are talking about possible sanctions of stripping Manchester City of some titles that they've previously won. What kind of sanctions are we looking at?
I don't think we're going to see a stripping of titles. I think it's more likely that the Premier League will take actions either in the form of fines, points deductions, or possible sanctions on signing players. The most extreme sanction would be Manchester City being kicked out of the Premier League. Can't see that happening. Manchester City are one of the biggest brands within the Premier League, and Manchester City's success is part of what makes the Premier League so successful as a global brand. I don't think the Premier League are going to want to lose that. We have seen in other countries, Juventus, for example, have been relegated to lower leagues in Italy, but I think the Premier League's a little bit different in that it brings in so much more money globally, and the commercial success of the Premier League has been so great that I really can't see one of its best assets being kicked out. If Manchester City were kicked out, then what do Manchester City do? Are they relegated a few leagues down or a league down in the English pyramid? Or do they say, well, if we're kicked out of the Premier League, we might go and reinvestigate the possibility of a European Super League, which I don't think the Premier League would be particularly keen on. So I think the sanctions are more likely to be things like points deductions or fines. In terms of what we've seen in the past at other football clubs, we haven't seen it in the Premier League, but we have seen it lower down the pyramid. So in the English Football League, for example, in the Championship, both Birmingham and Reading have been fined points in the past for breaches of financial fair play. So although they are governed individually, the EFL govern the Championship, League One and League Two, and the Premiership govern themselves, there is sort of a precedent, if you like, within English football that financial fair play is met with points deductions. Now that could possibly see Manchester City unable to compete in Europe for a season, for example, if they're unable to achieve the points to get into the top 4 or 5. And this will have implications for their revenue for the following season. So they will probably lose somewhere in the region of £60 to £100 million by not qualifying for the European competition. That's probably just going to be a short-term issue for City. I would have thought the season after they will probably bounce back and get one of those top 4 spaces again. It's unlikely in that instance it'll have an impact on signing players and things. We've already seen the likes of Liverpool and Chelsea, who are perhaps not doing as successful as you know they would like to be. Sorry, my office lights have gone off.
We often have that here in South Africa.
So but we haven't seen an excess of players from Chelsea or from Liverpool for being further down, and the likelihood that neither will play in European competitions next season. So I can't really see it being an issue for City that way.
Could there be any personal sanctions? We had Dimitri Selak being quoted in the British media today, that's Yaya Toure's former agent, to say that he didn't receive any secret payments from the club, that's Manchester City. It's understood to be among some of the charges. I'm not aware of any individual charges that have been brought. I would have to go back and check the rule book, to be honest, to check of whether that was actually a viable option. Mark Midling, he is a assistant professor in accounting at Northumbria University and a football finance expert. We thank you very much for your time here on Newzroom Afrika this evening. And that's how we conclude focusing on your sport for this hour. There will be more for you coming at about 7:45. Do stay with us.